This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
It's the Noon Report from Family Life, bringing a Christian worldview to what's happening in New York, Pennsylvania, across the country, and around the world. Weather with Kevin Williams, plus special features and reports with the Family Life News team. Now, here's what's happening.
Crime and punishment. Good afternoon. Welcome to the broadcast. The man accused of murdering a Ukrainian refugee on a train in Charlotte could face the death penalty. The victim, 23-year-old Irina Zarutska, was working 2 jobs to save up for a car. She volunteered at a senior center and had left Ukraine 3 years ago for a better life in America. Russ Ferguson is the U.S. Attorney for the Western District of North Carolina.
After Irina's death, the embassy in Ukraine called and said, "We'll help you bring her home." And her family said no. They said she loved America. We're going to bury her here. So I think we can give her an America to be proud of. Something here is broken, and we're here to fix it.
The federal government's gotten involved in this case after it was learned the suspect had been arrested and released 14 times due to cashless bail. President Trump at the White House yesterday.
We cannot allow a depraved criminal element of violent repeat offenders to continue spreading destruction and death throughout our country. We have to be vicious just like they are. It's the only thing they understand.
The president's pushed for a crackdown on crime in several Democrat-led cities following his federal takeover of the D.C. police. That federal control of the nation's capital expires today. Panic in Poland. The Polish Air Force shot down Russian drones overnight in its airspace as the Putin regime continues attacks on targets in Ukraine. Correspondent Molly Hunter.
Poland says it shot down a number of Russian drones that had crossed over the Ukrainian border into Polish airspace, calling it an act of aggression, a large-scale provocation, adding that the Russian drones were a, quote, direct threat. It is unprecedented in the last 3.5 years since Russia invaded Ukraine. Poland's prime minister said it is the first time Russian drones have been shot down over a NATO country.
The BBC's Sarah Rainsford continues our coverage from Kyiv.
Russia is always pushing and probing to see how the West responds. Certainly here in Ukraine, that is how officials are portraying this. They say this is deliberate by Russia. They say it is about provoking the West into a response, and it is a test that Ukraine is calling on its Western allies to rise to.
Poland's defense minister says one object hit a house. 4 airports in Poland suspended operations due to those Russian drones. The White House is expressing anger with Israel for carrying out a military strike on Hamas in Doha, Qatar. CBS's Weijia Jiang.
This strike comes at a delicate time as the U.S. tries to broker a peace agreement between Israel and Hamas. President Trump says the attack does not advance Israel or America's goals. He posted on social media that this was a decision made by Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. The president spoke with Netanyahu and Qatari leaders, and he assured the Qataris another attack would not unfold on their soil.
NBC's Keir Simmons has more from Doha, Qatar.
This is another international crisis for President Trump to deal with. An Israeli official just saying that Israel does not always act in the interest of the United States. President Trump saying when he learned of the attack on Qatar, where I am here now, he tried to warn them, but the bombs were already falling on this city.
The Qataris are our allies and play an integral part in the ongoing peace talks between Israel and Hamas. 5 Hamas leaders were killed in that airstrike. Protests are growing more violent over a social media ban in Nepal. That ban has been lifted, but still tens of thousands have been demonstrating against government corruption in the capital city of Kathmandu. The protesters set fire to government buildings and the homes of many politicians. Police opened fire on those demonstrators earlier this week, killing more than 20 people. The U.S. Supreme Court's agreed to hear arguments in November on whether President Trump's tariffs are legal. The focus will be on whether Congress or the president has the right to set tariffs. Those tariffs will remain in place until the High Court decides. New data shows shows former President Joe Biden overreported job creation during his 4 years in office.
Job growth was vastly weaker during the Biden administration than ever previously reported.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt says the ex-president reported 2 million more jobs than actually existed during his time in office.
This makes it very clear that President Trump inherited a much worse economy by the Biden administration than ever reported.
President Trump booted the Labor Department's stats chief, a Biden appointee, last month. Trump claims that she manipulated the data on a poor jobs report during his first months back in office. President Trump will be commemorating the 24th anniversary of 9/11 tomorrow. He'll be at a 9/11 observance ceremony at the Pentagon, but will not travel to Ground Zero in Manhattan. Trump will travel to the Bronx later in the day to take in a Yankees game. Still to come on the Noon Report, ICE protest in Rochester, digital detox for kids, and Lockheed Martin lands a major contract.
Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Williams. A fine day underway as our serene weather pattern continues. I'll have forecast details in 10 minutes.
All right, Kevin, we'll see you then. Let's check the stories making news across New York and Pennsylvania. The U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of New York says 57 people were detained and 5 were arrested after last week's ICE raid on a food processing plant in Cayuga County. John Sarcone describes the incident as a court-authorized law enforcement action.
They had notice, and they've done this to themselves. They've done this to their families. They're the ones responsible. If I did something reckless and it impacted my family, that's on me. So doing something illegal, it is illegal to come into the country without proper authorization.
The owners of that food processing plant are under investigation but have not yet been charged. Those being detained face up to 2 years in prison. They've been charged with illegally re-entering the U.S. A protest over ICE activities got out of hand yesterday in Rochester, New York.
ICE out of Rochester! ICE out of Rochester!
The ICE operation was to apprehend illegal immigrants who were working on a home construction project. New York Assemblywoman Jen Lunsford was there.
They were here for some of the workers on the roof. A call went out to the Rapid Response Network. People showed up. New York Immigration Coalition was alerted. They alerted elected officials.
Protesters slashed the tires of an ICE vehicle and spit and swore at federal officers as they left the scene. This witness telling Spectrum News.
A crowd of people blocking the road and federal agents coming out, and people were yelling at them, swearing at them, spitting at them. People were yelling at them to leave and to get out, but their tires were slashed in their car, and they were following them as they were walking away and being in their face, screaming at them, calling them the Gestapo.
One migrant was taken into custody. The other refused to get off the roof. Democrat Harry Bronson represents the Rochester area in the New York State Assembly.
So one rogue person slashed a tire. Let's not let that miss what this really is about, which is an attack on our democracy.
The incident comes as the Trump administration ramps up immigration enforcement efforts all across the country. Over a dozen explosive devices were seized yesterday from a home in Mill Creek Township, Pennsylvania. An entire neighborhood was evacuated as state troopers and the FBI raided that home in Lebanon County. They recovered 14 homemade bombs along with a remote detonation device. These residents live near the home in question.
It's very frustrating, you know. I would like to find answers. What's going on? Yeah, I'm just baffled.
I joked, I said, is my house going to blow up? Because they were firefighters, which didn't, what else would be happening with all that activity? And yeah, we had no idea for a while what was happening.
It's scary, you know, you don't know, if one of them goes off or something.
The home belonged to a 40-year-old man who was the subject of a domestic abuse investigation. He was taken into custody and now faces even more charges, including possessing weapons of mass destruction. A Colorado man is facing charges for allegedly threatening a Catholic school in Bradford County, Pennsylvania. Authorities say the 62-year-old sent multiple emails threatening violence at the Epiphany Epiphany School in Sayre. Those emails were sent last month. According to officers, this guy has been harassing employees at that school since 1999. He was extradited to Pennsylvania last week and is being held on $350,000 bail. Defense contractor Lockheed Martin in Owego, New York, has just landed a $56 million federal contract. It's to build the next generation of B-2 stealth bombers for the Air Force. These Owego residents tell 18 News that is good news for the local economy.
It's excellent because it brings in more jobs, and more jobs equals people coming back down here. We're a very small town, and we rely on a lot of foot traffic. And Lockheed Martin is one of the largest employers in our area down here, so it's a huge contribution to our community.
It's a bonus for the area. Owego's kind of like been sliding down business-wise. When you lose over 5,000 employees with IBM, it changed the dynamics of the town.
Southern Tier Congressman Nick Langworthy says the project will take more than half a decade to complete. No word on how many jobs this contract will mean for the village of Owego. The Buffalo Bills have launched a new marketing campaign to build their fan base north of the border in Toronto. Here's Family Life's Dee Haley.
In a news release yesterday, the Buffalo Bills and Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment announced a new Toronto-focused marketing campaign as the team's latest effort in growing its fan base in the Greater Toronto area. The campaign marks the team's most tangible effort to attract Canadian fans since the franchise's last regular season home game north of the border in 2013. The partnership will include working with the Canadian Football League's Toronto Argonauts, National Basketball Association's Toronto Raptors, and Major League Soccer's Toronto FC. Dee Haley, Family Life News.
Thank you, Dee. A famous Philadelphia artist is creating a mural honoring legendary Syracuse University men's basketball coach Jim Boeheim. The more than 3-story tall mural will go up on a building at Armory Square on West Fayette Street. The painting project begins later this month. Boeheim coached SU for 47 years and won a national title in 2003. We've got more sports next. It's the 2-minute drill on Family Life.
Good afternoon, I'm Randy Snavely. Bob, it was too much Parker Meadows for the Yankees to handle last night. The Tiger center fielder went 3 for 5, hit a 2-run home run, and drove in 3. In fact, every Detroit starter had at least 1 RBI except for 1 in their 12-2 rout of the Yankees. Aaron Judge hit his 359th career home run in the loss. That puts him past Yogi Berra for 5th place all-time on the Yankees list. In Philadelphia, another lopsided defeat for the New York team. The Mets fell to the Phillies 9-3. Ranger Suarez had his A-game going. He struck out a dozen batters over 6 scoreless innings and only allowed 1 hit. Kyle Schwarber became the first National Leaguer to reach 50 home runs. He hit a 3-run shot in the 7th that kind of blew the game open. Philly has won 5 of 6. The Mets have dropped 4 straight. Samuel Basallo hit a walk-off single in the 11th inning. That gave the Orioles a 3-2 victory over Pittsburgh. The game winner for Basallo, his second walk-off hit in just 17 big league games. Andrew McCutchen and Tommy Pham both drove in runs for the Buccos. Elsewhere in the Bigs, Cleveland shut out the Royals 2-zip. Toronto edged Houston in 10, 4-3. The Rays got past the White Sox 5-4. The Angels put a hurt on the Twins 12-2. Boston shut down the Athletics 6-zip. The Marlins fell to the Nationals 7-5. The Cubs beat the Braves 6-1. Cincy doubled up San Diego 4-2. Giants 5-3 winners over the D-backs. The Dodgers topped the Rockies 7-2. Texas squeaked past Milwaukee 5-4. And the Mariners beat St. Louis 5-3. That is a look at sports.
Thank you, Randy. And still to come on the Noon Report, a midweek edition. Murder on the mass transit. Coping with grief and panic in Poland.
Welcome to Breakpoint, a daily look at an ever-changing culture through the lens of unchanging truth. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stone Street. In recent years, the evidence against smartphones for children and teenagers has only grown. There's a clear correlation between the use of digital technologies and things like mental illness, anxiety, identity confusion, loneliness, and depression. In her new book, The Tech Exit, A Practical Guide to Freeing Kids and Teens from Smartphones, Claire Morrell, fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center, demonstrates that it is indeed possible to get back ahead of smartphones within our homes. Recently, Morrell was a guest on a recent bonus episode of the Breakpoint podcast with Maria Bear. Here's what she had to say.
The brain research really shows that even a small amount of time on social media, smartphones, any type of really interactive screen is highly addictive to the brain. That the brain actually goes into this dopamine deficit state as soon as they get off. And so no time limit is ever enough, because as soon as they leave the app or leave the screen, their brain does not return to a normal baseline. It actually dips below baseline to create this craving for you to repeat that behavior and do it again. And so the brain imaging studies of heavy users of social media resemble those of those who have been addicted to highly addictive drugs. And so the structural changes happening at the brain level are the same. And then another kind of convincing piece of research was a doctor named Victoria Dunkley was seeing kids coming into her practice with kind of what you were describing, these mood issues, a lot of behavioral issues, just emotional dysregulation, mood swings, just irritability, tantrums. And she found that just taking away the screens reduced, in a lot of cases, the symptoms entirely, like eliminated them. Because parents were coming in saying that they thought their kid had ADHD or autism because of these behavioral changes, things they were seeing in their kids. And what she found is that it was actually induced by electronic screens. And so it just convinced me that the design of these technologies are so addictive, and they create this really strong response on a child's developing brain and nervous system that they aren't safe in any amount. And so especially for Christian parents, I would say, like, even if you're like, we're not letting them watch any bad content, we've made sure the content is really safe, you still need to be concerned that the design of the technology itself is harmful to your child's development, even in small amounts. And so that's why I argue for a total exit and show parents how to do it.
That was Claire Morrell, fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center and author of a terrific and must-read new book, The Tech Exit, A Practical Guide to Freeing Kids and Teens from Smartphones. Listen to this entire bonus episode of the Breakpoint podcast by searching for Breakpoint wherever you download podcasts. According to author and researcher Jonathan Haidt, nearly 1/3 of parents regret giving their child a smartphone or access to social media when they did, but only 1% say they wish they had provided those things sooner. So take the tech exit. Your kids might not thank you now, but they probably will later on. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet with Breakpoint.
Thank you, John. Let's head outside. Kevin Williams.
Here is your family life weather forecast for this afternoon. A little cloudiness at times in eastern Pennsylvania, but overall ample sunshine, comfortable, high in the 70s. Tonight, partly cloudy to clear, low temperatures, mid-40s to low 50s, some fog in the valleys late. For tomorrow, sun, some mixed clouds in New York, high temps in the 70s, ample sunshine on Friday with high temperatures in the 70s.
Well, it ever rain again. Thank you very much, Kevin Williams. We've been enjoying some really nice weather of late. This is the Noon Report. I'm your host, Bob Price. Lots going on Wednesday, the 10th of September. The Trump administration seeking justice for the Ukrainian refugee who was killed on a train in Charlotte, North Carolina. The family of 23-year-old Irina Zarutska speaking out now after we learned that her alleged killer is facing life in prison or perhaps death by lethal injection. The victim's mom says her daughter came to America seeking a better life, but instead her life was stolen. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi.
We are going to prosecute him to the fullest extent of the law. We have taken the case because it's murder on mass transit. Progressive DAs cannot handle this case. This has zero to do with politics. I've been a prosecutor for a very, very long time. This is one of the most gruesome murders I've seen in my career.
The accused killer had been arrested and released 14 times. Former Vice President Kamala Harris admits that her former boss, Joe Biden, got tired while in office, but she insists insists there was no big conspiracy to cover up his decline. Harris makes the claim in her new book, 107 Days, which details her experience at running for president. Operation Midway Blitz underway in Chicago. ICE agents making a handful of arrests yesterday. The stepped-up law enforcement effort targets sanctuary cities. Hundreds of protesters showed up last night in Chicago to protest those ICE raids.
People are, frankly, afraid. In our communities, they're afraid to come out of their homes. They're afraid to go shopping. They're afraid to take their own children to school.
Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. Poland says Russian drones violated its airspace overnight on an unprecedented scale. That NATO state's now calling it an act of aggression. Polish jets shot down the drones. The EU says Russia's violation of Polish airspace was intentional. More on the story from Chris Foster at Fox Radio.
Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk says 19 Russian drones entered his country's airspace, with 4 considered direct threats shot down. Tusk says a line has been crossed, and this brings us the closest we've been to open conflict since World War II. Drones have been reported over Poland before, including twice last week, and NATO jets have scrambled, but never this many drones, and these are the first shots fired by a NATO nation during the war between Russia and Ukraine.
President Trump says he was not happy with yesterday's Israeli airstrike on Hamas targets in Doha, Qatar.
I'm not thrilled about the whole situation. It's not a good situation. But I will say this, we want the hostages back, but we are not thrilled about the way that went down.
The president says he was not notified in advance and it was too late to stop the strike after he got word from the Pentagon. Reporter Holly Williams continues our coverage.
Qatar is a vital U.S. partner and a mediator in ceasefire talks. It condemned the attack on its soil as criminal.
Hamas says its top leader survived the attack, but 5 lower-ranking Hamas members were killed. The death toll is rising in Nepal after a social media crackdown led to violent protests. The government of Nepal banned dozens of online platforms last week, leading to violence. Monday, a crowd of mostly young people set fire to government buildings and the homes of politicians. In Kathmandu, over 20 have died so far in those riots. The GOP is a step closer to getting one more seat in Congress after Missouri lawmakers passed a new redistricting map.
Their plan? Redraw the map lines, carve up Kansas City, and flip one safe Democratic seat into Republican hands. One more seat for the GOP in Congress, one less for the Democrats.
That's reporter Mark Maxwell in Jefferson City. For the first time, an invasive disease-carrying tick has showed up in the state of Maine. It's the Asian longhorn tick, and its presence there is indeed troubling.
It's the farthest northeast the invasive ticks have been discovered. They were first identified in the U.S. in New Jersey 8 years ago and have since been reported in more than 20 states across the Northeast, Midwest, and Southeast. The ticks carry a pathogen that causes disease in cattle. They can also be dangerous to humans, causing Rocky Mountain spotted fever, heartland virus, and Powassan virus. A female Asian longhorn tick can produce up to 2,000 eggs without mating.
Michael Wallace reporting. Cleanup continues in California after 67 shipping containers fell into the port of Long Beach. What a mess there. The incident forced all cargo operations on the pier to be suspended. A spokesperson for the port says this is unprecedented.
We've never had a situation like this, certainly of this magnitude. Sometimes you hear of a container or two falling off a ship, but not 67.
That container ship, which came from China, was carrying everything from shoes to electronics. Some of those containers plunged into the Pacific Ocean. This is the Noon Report, a Wednesday edition on Family Life.
Dealing with grief and uncertainty from a Christian perspective. Welcome back to another edition of Real Answers, a regular Wednesday feature during the Family Life Noon Report, where we discuss the issues that matter to families with licensed mental health counselor Christopher Anderson. Hi, Chris.
Hey, Mark. How you doing?
Good to have you aboard again. Tough topic today, but it's an important one, dealing with grief, which comes to all of us in one form or another during our lives in a world of seemingly daily tragedy, with or without an obvious cause. One question often asked asked is, how could a loving God let that happen? And that's something I guess even believers can struggle with.
We do. At some point in our lives, we ask these questions, and of course the big one is why? And we may or may not have that answer right away. And so the next question is, well, then what do I do with where I'm at? And how can I navigate these strong emotions and make sense of what happened and just keep going? And right there, I think, is where we really need to focus and just say, what do I do now? Especially if it's an unforeseen grief, if like you didn't know it was coming. I mean, we all know at some point we're going to, hopefully for believers, we're going to go home to be with the Lord. But what about when we didn't see it coming and all of a sudden we wake up or we go to bed and our world is completely turned upside down? What do we do? That right there is where we need to park it.
Absolutely. I just had a family member that is dealing with a miscarriage, and there's a good example of something that you're poised for joy, and then boom, suddenly it's the opposite end. Now, the Bible, of course, doesn't shy away from grief. Even Christ wasn't immune to it. One scripture passage that's famed for its brevity is John 11:35. Jesus wept. The context being his grief over the death of Lazarus, even though he knew he was going to raise him from the dead. So even with that unique ability to actually do something about it, Christ still gave us a pretty powerful example there.
Yeah, he really did. And of course, he knew that at some point we'd be having this discussion right now and could draw on the lessons that he wanted us to learn. And that is the fact that even when it doesn't make sense, because what was he crying over? I think what he was doing is he was empathizing. He was sad to see his beloved children sad, and he was empathizing with their grief, even if there's a plan that we don't see. But we have to somehow hold on to the fact that we've got a loving God, that even when the why isn't answered, we have got to understand there is something there that eventually will be revealed to us that will make sense.
Absolutely. Death and other tragedies often leave friends and family members, at a loss for words. And sometimes early on, maybe a loss of words isn't an entirely bad thing.
That's true. That's true. And I mean, there's times even when I am at a loss for words, I think, oh, that's probably good at this point.
Sometimes, just better if you're not sure exactly what to say, don't say anything.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, you touched on this too. One tenet of Christianity, I think we could agree, is the importance of always being in the Word, and one reason for that is storing it away in our hearts and minds so that when we're confronted by grief and loss, at least we're anchored to that bedrock.
We are, and it helps us to recall God's word and God's truth, of course, when it really is difficult to do so. And I think about folks that lose children. Boy, my heart just really goes out to those folks. If you know somebody that's in that boat, just make yourselves available, whatever you can do to offer comfort and support. And be careful, whatever you do, don't just flippantly throw out scripture or throw out biblical principles because you've been trained to know what to say, because that really, even though you might be saying the truth, that's not real empathetic. Sometimes you just need to let them unload and cry with them, just like Jesus did with Mary and Martha. Cry with them to show that, look, you're there with them, and that type of thing. And of course, if you're encountering a situation, you start to see in somebody else that, boy, they're just not handling this well. Don't hesitate to encourage them to reach out to a counselor or a pastor or somebody else that can help assist in supporting that individual. And over time, we would want that to, of course, with healthy support, we would want those emotions to become more in check. And you're going to have good days and bad days, and as long as those difficult days become shallower or not as extreme and further apart, that's a good indication that you're starting to process the grief, and eventually you're going to be able to start moving onward. That's really how you want to kind of come alongside somebody. You don't have to have the answers. Basically, your presence and your ability to just be there and sit there and hold their hand or just share a meal or whatever, a lot of times is exactly what they need.
The day of Christ's death is called Good Friday, and I remember in the 1950s and on, when I was a kid, we used to see the Peanuts comics character Charlie Brown, who popularized the exclamation, good grief. I guess, in a manner of speaking, even grief ultimately can, in some ways, be good.
It can be, as long as it keeps us focused on Christ and as long as we're able to get through the grief. And of course, if it becomes, like I said, an issue, or you're turning to other things to deal with the grief, such as alcohol or other substances, if you find that you're avoiding connecting with folks, or you just don't want to be around anybody and you're isolating more and more, then at that point, please get some help. And it's okay to just say, look, I'm just not doing well, and I really need somebody to help me figure out what do I do next, okay? And again, by all means, if somebody's so steeped steeped in grief and you see like, listen, I'm afraid they might actually do something to themselves, don't hesitate for you to reach out to a trusted source like a counseling agency or a counselor, or really if you're afraid for somebody's immediate safety, by all means call 911 and just let them know what's going on. If you're really afraid that somebody doing something drastic is imminent, by all means do what you need to. If somebody is upset with you for doing that, that's okay. Guess what? You may have saved their life, and in the future you will be able to process that through with them, and if they refuse to, you still might have saved their life. So at that point, don't worry too much about whether they're going to be mad at you. Don't think in those terms. If you're worried that somebody's immediate safety is in jeopardy, go ahead and call who you need to. And again, 911 or the police or whatever you need to do to get somebody to help you out.
Excellent advice. You've been listening to Real Answers, a Wednesday feature of the Family Life Noon Report, where we discuss the issues important to families with licensed mental health counselor Christopher Anderson. Thanks again, Chris.
Always a pleasure, Mark.
All right. Thank you guys very much. Important topic there, coping with grief. You can download all our Real Answers podcasts, by the way, online anytime at a variety of platforms, including these: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or our website, familylife.org.
Good afternoon. Here is your Family Life regional weather forecast. Not much has changed since last we spoke. High pressure continues to dominate the northeastern United States, keeping our weather serene and sun-filled by and large. And no big changes are due for several more days. For this afternoon, a little cloudiness at times in eastern Pennsylvania, but overall ample sunshine, comfortable, high in the 70s. Tonight, partly cloudy to clear, low temperatures, mid-40s to low 50s, some fog in the valleys late. For tomorrow, sun, some mixed clouds in New York, high temps in the 70s, ample sunshine on Friday with high temperatures in the 70s.
Okay, keep the good times rolling. Kevin Williams, thank you. And finally at noon today, we're celebrating the original fast food. So grab a tray, pop it in the microwave, and pull up a seat on the couch. Family Life's Brian Query.
It was 1949. Albert and Meyer Bernstein founded Frozen Dinners Incorporated and began selling frozen meals near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It was 4 years later that C.A. Swanson & Sons developed a frozen Thanksgiving meal that would popularize the convenient dish we celebrate today as its National TV Dinner Day. As television became more of a pastime, TV dinners were seen as a way to make the TV viewing experience more enjoyable for families. They became even more convenient when trays were adapted for microwaves in the 1980s. And today there are thousands of frozen meal options, and though they aren't called TV dinners anymore, they cover a limitless range of food, including fruits and vegetables. And National TV Dinner Day is the holiday that is set aside to appreciate and enjoy the simplicity of eating while enjoying your favorite programs. Brian Query, Family Life News.
Food and television, they make a perfect marriage, kind of like peanut butter and jelly or Sonny and Cher. And that's our world, the world we live in. Wednesday, September 10th. I'm Bob Price. Family Life News.
You've been listening to the Noon Report, heard weekdays on Family Life. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.